So let's look through this bundle of mark making together. So we have some of our paint colors here. We have the stencil, and then I continued it with the staples. I have a tag with the indigo and the watercolor and the layers. Here's just a little piece of it. Here's a piece of vintage paper with some of that. Here's the vellum that we did together. Here's the postcard that we did together. Here's the torn vellum that is stapled and stitched. Here's just some paint on the stencil. Here's some of the vellum with the circular marks made with the India ink and the tiny brush. And tick marks forever. So you're going to see this over and over in different sizes. But here's just some of them. Here's some of our mark making with sticks. Once again, some vellum, some more intentional marks, some more vellum. This one, I'm really loving how it turned out. I love the type down here. And then I love the handwriting. I even like the, the Brad or whatever this is, part of the envelope. I really love it all together. Here's just other little pieces. Here's another library card, like an index card. Here's some marks. Here's our very wonky stencil that we made together. Here was the liquid graphite. And so you're seeing some things over and over. Maybe you're seeing some that look very similar, like these, because some things I might tear, some things, I added staples, and so, and then, create some things I created off camera and then recreated them with you. But I like having extras because I might want to include, one of these in more than just one inspiration board. Here's what we created the second time with the India ink. Here's just some of the oil paint diluted with the mineral spirits on the raw canvas. Here's some of our paint and our mark making. Here are our florals, our quick sketches with charcoal and water and white gesso. Our vintage negative with the 5 stencil. And then here's some of our marks with the vellum and then the pigment from Marrakesh and linseed oil. I really love these. We have our spray paint. We have our spray paint faces, and then just showing you just the impact that repetitive marks large can make. And so I loved making all of these with you guys, and I'm excited to see the impact that these marks have in the inspiration boards and just our own hand. Don't downplay how important it is to see the impact of your own hand and these simple marks over and over again, and how they'll really grab your attention and inspire you in your boards too. So the next bundle I want to talk about that I always like to include, they are words. And so I want to show you some of the things that I've collected, but these are from magazines, these are from newspapers, they're from books, And it's almost like a ritual almost that, you know, as I'm starting, and especially as I'm looking for words, I love the intention of gathering these words and then collecting them. And I'm always looking for something really different and interesting, or a unique font, or, you know, something like this that shows up looking like, well, it is a pencil, you know, hand lettering. Some of them are my own lettering that I've used and cut up. Some numbers are in here too, because I just love any time I see like these, like numbers. So numbers I'm really drawn to, and I love to sneak these into different parts of my art. I'm looking for quotes, I'm looking for poetry. I'll find them sometimes in old sheet music or great song titles. Until some of these are newspaper words. I don't know how that slipped in there. One of my favorite books that I read in 2019 was 9th Street Women by Mary Gabriel. And it took me about all year to get it, to finish it, because it's one of the biggest books that I think I've read in a very long time. But one of the things that I loved was finding this old 9th Street poster for an exhibition. And so when I find something like this, I save it, I print it out. This is not something I would include in my art, but it's something that I'm inspired by, really like vintage posters and vintage fonts and the story behind them. So a lot of these things may be things that I have printed out because I really love the font, and I'm just inspired in some way by it. Paint Your Story is just from my book, The Painted Art Journal. Not All Those Who Wander Are Lost. It's from one of our living studio workshops overseas. Sometimes there are postcards from places. Still other quotes. Invent Your Way Through. This was made by Sabrina Ward Harrison. Sometimes it's not even a complete thought, right? Or a sentence. This was something that I even tore in half, and I still think it's beautiful. And then sometimes I find things in some of my art books, and maybe there's just a section of it I think is really interesting. So I really loved taking a photo up close of this and then printing it out. I love people's handwriting, so you're going to see that again and again in a lot of things. This was a sign that my friend Alexis Garrett took when she was on a trip with her husband, and I love it. I don't have any idea what it says. Somebody should probably tell me. I just love the black with the white and the drips. I think it's completely amazing, and so we might be doing something with this later too. And again, just other people's handwriting, things that were in design books, and it was not even a featured of the page, and I just take a picture really close up because I just love all of the numbers. I even loved the old molding, chippy, and that beautiful blue. And so I take photos of things all the time. And sometimes I take photos of books and I just crop them and then print them out. Isn't that true? And sometimes I print them in color. Sometimes black and white. And I just even love the font choices for this book about Black Mountain College. And so I wanted to give you an idea of like what I'm drawn to, and when it comes to words and font and type in general. And so this becomes such a fun aspect of not only the thoughts and the feelings maybe in word about each board, but it allows you to even use your own handwriting. It allows you to collect others. And I think most of us are so drawn to words. We're drawn to art sometimes that says words that we connect with. How many times have you seen a piece of art, but maybe the title draws you in also? And so don't be afraid to use your own handwriting. Don't be afraid to be clipping out of books and newspapers and magazines and collecting those little bits that you're really drawn to. Our next bundle is all about imagery that you are drawn to by other people. And so maybe you're going to find this in newspapers or magazines or books. Maybe you're going to find it on Pinterest. Maybe you're going to find it in magazines. Maybe you're going to find it through postcards and travel. And so I want to share some of the images that I'm inspired by. So I love Françoise Gillot, and so I have printed out some of her art. I have postcards from travel. Sometimes there's just going to be this little snippet of something in a magazine that you are intrigued by the just the composition of everything in it. Sometimes what you're going to be drawn to are things like that you want to still do. And we'll talk about this more when we do our first inspiration board together. So for me, here's a picture of the John Muir Trail. And here's Portland, Maine. And here's the Appalachian Trail. And I wanted to include those. Some things are going to be wonky and strange, and other times you're just going to be in love with how another person captured the world, or how they wrote their words, or the lines that they made in their art. And it doesn't mean that this is going to be cut out and put into future work. It's a reminder to me what I find lovely. I find trees beautiful. I love handwriting. I love dappled light. I love great intentional mark making. I love the ocean. I love Twombly and his marks. I love portraits of women. I just admire the women artists that came before me. Once again, handwriting, and I picked this up. It's from a poetry book that I picked up in Manzanita, Oregon one year, and I loved the simplicity of the birds in this. I love the moodiness. This is one of the pieces of Helen Frankenthaler that I saved, and we printed out to incorporate it if I wanted to. Once again, font and line and design. When you start gathering and when you are really paying attention, then you're able to, when you have a board in front of you, to, for your life boards, it could be like, am I staying on track? Am I incorporating these things into my life? When it comes to a body of work that I want to make, if I have inspiration that I'm looking at, not only am I including my own hand, but also have other things that I think are beautiful. When you get stuck, are you looking there and saying, like, what is here that I'm not thinking about that I could incorporate? When I'm bringing things together and thoughts and gathering things for a future class, it's about everything from color to subject matter to marks to, creative projects to do together. What I sometimes like about one single little page or maybe one little mark. And we see so many things each day, and it's hard to remember sometimes what we find the most lovely. These are some vintage plant images from a botanical magazine. What I printed this out is because I wanted to be reminded you don't have to have all your lines to connect, right? It's kind of like when I paint portraits. I know that I don't have to put in every little detail for your brain to put together that it's a face. But sometimes I can forget that when it comes to animals or landscape or florals. And this is my reminder that this horse was perfectly clear that it's a horse. I don't need to connect all the lines. So when you're collecting things, it doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to recreate this. No, it is a reminder. There's a lesson here, and sometimes I need my lessons in front of my face. I love the color with the fonts. I like the real clear intentional lines. I love the numbers at the bottom of the page on the sticker. That's why this was printed out and saved. I love Picasso, but I also love gardening and I love landscaping. And this to me is like the best ever. If I could have this sculpture and water feature in my yard, I would be like over the moon. I love abandoned spaces. I love imperfection. I love a used studio. I love this. I just came across this in a new book that I got, and what I love so much is that I did a class, a while ago called Wandering Muse, and we were ripping up faces, and then I come across this from Andy Warhol. Lenny Kravitz owns this, and it's of Mick Jagger. And how awesome is this? So there's a picture of Mick Jagger, then there's the drawing of his hands, and then to have this sketch on top of his face, I thought it's incredible. I think it's beautiful. And so to me, it's a reminder, once again, you can take the same thing. You could take florals or landscapes and you can recreate it multiple times in different ways with different mediums, and then you can tear them up and put them back together. I love when, you can take different substrates and you can put them together, like the triptych that I showed you earlier with the mark making, to have the 3 different boards and to bring this together. It's just a reminder, don't get stuck in thinking you have, for me as an artist, to have one substrate. And so how are you going to use these bundles that we're bringing together? If you're not an artist in the way that I am, if you're a decorator or a writer, or if you're a gardener, if you're a landscaper, whatever it is, you're going to have these same reminders. And so Twombly again with his marks and his hand lettering. I love these yard pictures that are lush and intentionally overgrown and pathways. And I really love just simple, simple beauty. But there's nothing like simple about it, is there? These are such beautiful, intentional captures of how beautiful our world is. Like silverware on a napkin, on a linen napkin. And I am a huge fan of vintage classroom photos. I've used them in many art projects, and maybe it's because I love repetition. I sure love repetitive mark making, and so maybe doing one portrait after another and combining them kind of has the same impact that I love so much. Our next bundle is all about texture. Now, how I'm choosing to represent that and to have that be incorporated into my inspiration boards is through fabric and through stitching. I have been in love with embroidery in vintage French linens for such a long time now, whether it were their bed clothing or their bed gowns or their beautiful sheets or their tea towels. And so to me, just this, to incorporate the stitching into some of my art and in some ways that I express myself has been really fun as I've gotten older. My grandma Jeanne, who I'm named after, she was always, if we had family gatherings, she was a composer. She was also a pianist and a playwright, and she was a very accomplished woman, and I think she had a hard time sitting still, which sometimes that can be hard for me because I want to be present, I want to sit with everyone, or if they want to watch something. So I have found that stitching actually is the one art form, like the only one I've found so far, that I can do with other people around, and I can completely be engaged in talking with them and still be creating. And so sometimes it's things that are super easy. They're just repetitive marks again, but this time I'm doing them in fabric. And so I'm doing these little marks on vintage French linens, or maybe I will dye some of my fabrics and stitch those. Sometimes I'm taking all of these different fabric pieces and I'm stitching them together and just creating these beautiful compositions of vintage fabrics and new fabrics and stitches and book spines and things that I find are beautiful. So once again, just these repetitive marks. And then faces. Faces has been such a fun way for me to go from my love of sketching and painting portraits to stitching also. This is just another one of my stamps, one of my linos that I created after a trip to Prague, and this was from one of the statues in the, it was a tribute to the, just the pain and the horror of communism, and it was just this incredible set of sculptures. And when I came back, I created a lino from that, then also stamped it on this canvas, and then stitched this. Here's just some more pieces, stitching also on book spine. And then I've also included some of my dyed, some of it's drop cloth, some of it's cheesecloth, and these are all from, this is from hibiscus, and this is from avocado pits. And this actually has stitched in words on the end that I found, and I knew I had to incorporate that somehow. So texture does not have to be for you what it is for me in the boards. Maybe you're going to bring in plaster, or maybe you're going to bring in wood. Maybe you're going to bring in rug pieces. I don't know what you're going to choose to do, whether it will be brick or tile, but based upon your loves. I know that right now you're probably thinking of exactly the perfect thing that you can use to include texture. The next thing that you'll be gathering is your palette. So I'm just showing you some watercolors right now, but I don't care if you bring it in with crayons or paints or watercolors, however you choose to bring in a color palette, but I will have you gather some colors and we will create a palette for each of our 3 inspiration boards. So don't overthink this, don't go buy a bunch of stuff, but I just want you to start thinking about what colors represent the mood of the boards in which you want to create. One of the bundles, I want it to be, whether it's your writings or your sketchings or your paintings or little bits and pieces of things, whatever your thing is, I want that to be represented. So for me, they're other gathered palettes or little bits of color combinations I'm bringing together. So maybe they're going to be old pieces of previous work. Repetitive marks. So this is nothing that I've created new, because we just did those marks, but these are other things that I went through, things that I already had. This is a printout of a piece of my work, and it's just a little piece of it. I love some of these portraits that I did from my book, The Painted Art Journal, and I might want to include some of that on one of my walls. I don't know. That's the thing about the gathering, is that it doesn't mean you have to use everything, but I do want you to bring them together so you have choices. So this was also the spray painted stencil, but I did that before our class. Here's just a sketch that's on black gesso. Some things are printed out on vellum, just photocopies, rough sketches, maybe lines, just marks that I like, color palettes I like. Another color palette, some other marks that I did on vellum, some of my linos, just one of my art pieces from a previous class. This is from my book. This is from my book. This is also this is a piece of this is my work that we just printed it out. I don't have this one anymore. It was quite small, the piece that I did create, and I would really love to create this again, but very large. And so, you can even include images of previous work and whatever that is for you. These are fun little compositions that I've put together. So these are things that are marks and lines that I like. So there's actually just little different pieces of paper that have been glued down. Just loose landscapes and sketches, mark making. These are just sections of a bigger painting that were printed out. And so I just want you to be just gathering some of the things and the marks and the ideas that you've already created, and gather those together. And this is one of the things I really want you to hear me on too. I know I've talked about that these inspiration boards are you can take things away or you can add to them. I hope you remember that so you don't get stressed out by this. Because I even had to remind myself as I'm gathering things for this class, like, when had I gathered enough? How was I going to create a beautiful class unless I had all the things, that I could possibly need? And at a certain point, it's about the process. It's about kind of showing you how I do use them, how I put them together. And so and you have to keep in mind also, I use inspiration boards all of the time. I feel like I've been doing this since I've been a child, but I definitely love gathering the things that I think are most beautiful and keeping them in front of me. So it's, I want this to be a fun process. And if you're saying like, well, I don't have a pile of things, then I want you to know we've made marks together, and I want you to not get stuck or hung up on one aspect of the bundles. If you need to, move on, and in time you'll know what to replace it with. And keep in mind, just because these are my bundles that I use doesn't mean that you're not going to have amazing, beautiful new ideas that you're going to give the class and tell them, instead of this, what you used instead. Our next bundle is ephemera, and I want to give you the real definition for those that are maybe hearing the word for the first time. So the meaning of ephemera is something of no lasting significance. These are paper items such as posters and tickets, and they were things that were originally meant to be discarded after use, but they have since become collectibles. Now, I wouldn't say that what I'm going to show you have become collectibles, but I'm going to call all of this ephemera, okay? Because I'm using it in different ways, but I'm going to show you I have vintage ephemera, and then I have this random ephemera here, and then I have things that I have done with some of the vintage papers, but I wanted to include that into the ephemera bundle just because it really made the most sense to be here. So first I'm going to show you just some papers that aren't vintage, but these are just tea bags because I love the color. This just the numbers that were inside a vintage passport. Numbers again on a ticket that I had that came with something, I don't know, again, it's just some numbers. This snuck in here. We love the Ace Hotel in Palm Springs, and they always have the best paper. And so this is for their tips. This is on their doors. Here's an old file folder, and it has just like numbers and letters along the top typed in. Just more from the Ace. This is what you put on your car. Cardboard. I love cardboard, and I love that when you kind of rip it open, look at the line here, look at the corrugated section, look at the bottom of it. I mean, I think it's really cool, and I love using these marks. This is kind of has a bunch of oil and cold wax on it from me making mark making into my wet oil and cold wax. And here's some wallpaper. So now I'm going to show you some pieces. I'm going to bring the camera down a little bit. And what's fun is when you can take, this book spine, and I brought in some wire, or I take an old photograph or a negative, and I mix it with other things that I love, like the book spines or fabric, and I staple. When I'm using old tags and then bringing in metal pieces, and once again stitching. Here's one of my fabric pieces that I've stitched, and it has an old negative attached to it. Here's another piece that has some fabric, that has stitching, that has the words back here on canvas, and it has one of my Polaroids, one of my photos that I took, and it was a Polaroid. I deconstructed it and brought it together in this. And then here's just taking one of the tea bags and stitching on it. So I wanted to show, just even though I'm calling all of this ephemera, I'm going to show you kind of, I put it in 3 different sections. And then these are just vintage papers. So I have tags and envelopes and index cards and tickets. And this is the record sleeve with the most beautiful color green, vintage vellum. I have some books to remind me of some other things that we're working on. Book spines, ledger pages, braille. I don't know if you can see that. More book spines and envelopes and documents. Book covers. Here's an old map. Book pages. More postcards. And another file folder. So if you do not love vintage papers like I do, the thing is, this stuff is all over in our world. It's in our mail, it's in our cardboard boxes, it's in tickets, it's in things we get from hotels. It's all around, and they can become really fun things that get included in your inspiration board, and also really sweet memory reminders. The next bundle, I'm calling it artifacts. So these are the things that you have found or collected, and they're more like objects. So here's a vintage paintbrush, and here's wire I might make something out of. And here's an old photograph, but it's been altered. An old metal tag, a negative, some cool old rusty metal. Here's an old metal stencil, an altered and deconstructed photograph. Here's an envelope with more negatives in them. Here's a stamp. I love stamping dates on things. Here's a wooden beaded necklace from Morocco, and this was for a child that I think is so beautiful. I don't even know what this is. I was given this from somebody who came and visited our studio, and it's amazing. It's so cool. Once again, it has font, it has numbers, it has the negative, it has all the things I love. Here, just some French laundry labels, and this one is J.O. Number 5 stamp. Old film. This, I was told, was from a French convent, and they had each one of the women's, all of the nuns' names on it, and this was how they kept track of chores. And so it would go into like chore. It would fit into almost like a board that goes on the wall. So this is Marguerite Marie. Number 5. Just treasures from travel or from friends. Kathy Penton. She took a piece of my art from years ago and she soldered and made it a little pendant, and she stitched in my initials. This is a piece. I have some bigger pieces too, and I'll bring those in a minute. My friend Alexis gave me these pieces from this painting that is hundreds and hundreds of years old, and they had to cut some of it away to frame it for one of her clients, and so I'll show you some of the bigger pieces. And so just going to put things back in here. And I don't know what I'm going to use, but these artifacts are just a really personal way of, you know, and a personal way of documenting through your boards, but also it's really a lovely way to use things that otherwise you might not know what to do with them. So when we're talking about our artifacts, don't just think they have to be tiny. So I don't know if I would do this and figure out a way to attach these to the wall, but here's some of my linos, and these are the actual carvings. This is a vintage French art palette, an old sign, and then here are the bigger pieces from that painting that had to be cut out. So what I love is this, and you can see this, the linen, the canvas underneath, the raw, and I think these are wonderful. So I'm going to have to incorporate them somehow. So don't feel like that you're limited, and you're going to see that we're going to start with a smaller inspiration board. We're going to move to a larger one on a board, and then we're going to move to the wall. And so really you're only going to be limited by the amount of space that you have available to you. And so I think, I mean, just go outside of the box and don't be limited on just small artifacts. Start looking around your house and start finding things that you think would look amazing on your boards. The next bundle are photographs taken by you or of family members, okay? And so here's a picture of my grandma Jeanne. There was a whole bunch of them, and it looks like it was from one of the those photo booths. And then I went through some of my Instagram photos, and there's nicer ways to do it than just the way I did it, but I just printed these out on our printer. Pictures of my kids at the beach, graffiti in downtown Denver, images of my work in different stages, kayaking on Lake Como, a messy desk creating, work in my studio, hiking. Blessed are the weird people, the artists, the writers, and the music makers, the dreamers and the outsiders, for they force us to see the world differently. And I took this at outside of an art gallery outside of Franklin, Tennessee. I took this picture crossing the street, almost getting hit by a bus in Budapest. My own work. I'm in the desert, in the Sahara, with Alexis. And I remember exactly what we were talking about when this photo was captured. And just adventures with her. California coast, the Oregon coast. I look very cheesy here, but I print it out anyways because I get very giddy happy being by the ocean. And I think there's something even extra special about how I feel on the Oregon coast. Bike riding in Austria. Leading a workshop in Amsterdam. Mark making, adventuring and having fun with my family. Leading women into creating and just intimate settings with intention. more hiking and exploring. My grandma and my grandfather. This is just a funny photo that's ready to fall apart. But my friend Alexis has teased this is going to be both of us someday. I think they're just smoking and drinking. They really look upstanding. Maddie at a cathedral around Easter time in France, lighting a candle. In the Orsay in Paris. Another image of my grandmother. And these I included because Michelle Wooderson gave me a wonderful gift one year, and I can't use them. I love them so much. She took from my Instagram account, she took images and then she printed them out and then she stapled on quotes. And it's such a wonderful gift. And she made cards out of them. But I loved that. Here's some printed out images. Here's some of my art. And so I want you to gather your marks or the work or the adventures. And like I said, you guys, this could be overwhelming. It doesn't need to be everything. It just needed me to get it started. And if you're working and you're finding that your inspiration board, what you have doesn't work, then you might know exactly what photograph would kind of complete it. I just really wanted you to start gathering. Because, like I said, these are not supposed to be works of art that we never touch. These are supposed to be usable. And so I want everything that you choose to include to have a purpose. All right, we're at our last bundle, and it's nature. And so foraging is one of my favorite things, and I collect whether I'm on our own land or if I'm on your land. Or when we vacation, I love seeing what I can find out in nature to bring home. And so nature is definitely going to have a lot to do with my inspiration board. So whether it's this mossy branch, magnolia branch, or these flower pods, or mullein, or I even have, let's see, a wasp nest here, feathers, sage. Black sage is my new obsession. I found this in California along the coast. There's mustard seeds here. I'm going to probably make a mess of everything, trying to be gentle with them. But nature is extraordinary. Even just look at, it's just amazing what we just find out on our land and out and about. I don't know, I'm just like, I always just want to bring it home and sketch it or paint it. Using sticks and dipping them in India ink and using them. Driftwood. A rock from our land with gorgeous moss on top. A hummingbird nest. I don't know if this is a hummingbird nest actually, but it's so tiny, but I think it is. But it might actually be too big for a hummingbird nest. And here are some of my collections from like the coast. So again, some of the black sage and a bird feather. Some sweet things that people that live near the ocean send to me because they know I will love it. So I just get little treasures. And so what do you collect in nature? What are you drawn to? I often, if I'm going to, especially if I'm going to include it in my inspiration boards, I pull it so I get the root. I love the look of the sage and then also the root there too. Oh, here's the mustard. I wanted to show you the mustard because it's so, I think this is the mustard. We had a gentleman come to our property this year and walk it with us and tell us a lot about our property. And it was really fun, and I barely remember anything compared to how much knowledge he had. But these little pods are so beautiful too. So I just wanted to show you some of the things that I have collected and what I'm going to be including in some of my inspiration boards. And I actually cannot wait to see, because we're going to have people from all over the world. And so what do you have in your yard, right? What do you have in your town? I think that's what's going to be so fascinating. We're going to need to do little foraged exchanges across the world. And I think it's just going to be so fun. Like this, most of this is on our land. And then there's some things from the ocean. And so I just want you to look around. I want you to look around, and I want you to have your eyes open, like I keep saying this again and again. And where is there beauty around you? Where is there unexpected beauty?